Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fun Math. Woo! Today is our final lesson, our final video lesson that we're doing, which is kind of crazy, and we are going to be learning about factoring by greatest common factor, 1am, and difference of perfect squares. Let's get to it.
All right, so let's get started with multiplying radical expressions. So first, we're going to go over some important vocab that is crucial to helping your understanding of this topic. Most people watching this probably know this already because of Algebra 1, but just in case you don't, for some reason, if you missed Algebra 1, it is right here for you. So a radical sign, it shows a quantity that is the nth root of a term, so it basically goes over and you have a number to the left of it that shows what root it is. An example of this is if you have a radical sign and then a 4 underneath it, if there's no number to the left of it, it is implied that it is the square root. So a square root of 4 equals 2. And same goes if you have a 3, cube root of 27 is 3, so on, so on. Okay, the other thing that is very important to know for this is foiling. It is a mnemonic that stands for first, outer, inner, last. And it's just very helpful when you're multiplying two expressions that are in parentheses or more expressions that are in parentheses. And we will see how this works in the next few slides. In this topic, we are just learning how to multiply radical expressions. And the biggest thing that you have to remember while doing this, and if you remember this, you will succeed, it is to always remember that the terms underneath the radical sign multiply together, they stick together, and the terms outside of the radical sign multiply together. So you don't want to mix them all. You want to make sure you keep them separate and then put them right next to each other. We will see how this unfolds in the next slide. All right, so this is example 1. It is a simpler example just to make sure that we can get the hang of everything. So 3 square root of 12 times the square root of 6. This is what we are trying to find. I have 3 foolproof steps that if you follow these and you understand these, you will be able to do this. I have faith in you. All right, so step 1, always simplify the radical expression. Always make sure that they are in simplest form. This will just help you. So while looking at this, I see that 3 square root of 12, that can be simplified. I broke down square root of 12 into the square root of 3 times the square root of 4. That multiplies to 12. And I know that the square root of 4 can be simplified into 2. So that number, 3 square root of 12 expression, has now turned into 3 times 2 times the square root of 3, which is seen right up here. And then you can just keep the square root of 6. So the next step, step 2, multiply the radicals together and multiply the non-radicals together. Remember, keep them separate and then you put them together at the end. So I always start with the non-radicals first. So in this, I see that I have 3 and 2. 3 times 2 is 6 right here. And then the radicals, I have square root of 3 and the square root of 6. And when multiplied together, it equals the square root of 18. So this is my new expression. Now, you may think you are done, but psych, you're not, because you have to make sure that you always simplify the radical at the end in order to just finish out the question. So looking at the square root of 18, I noticed that square root of 18 can also be seen as the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So if you break that down, I know that the square root of 9 is 3. That is something that I have memorized in my brain. If you're having trouble figuring out how to get to this, I would really recommend either printing out a sheet of paper that has all of the rules of radicals, or just memorizing them. I think memorizing them is very fast, and I think that it's very helpful. So then I can simplify this into 3. Square root of 18 is now simplified into 3 root 2. And you have to make sure that you multiply the 3 and the 6 together. So 6 times 3 times root 2 equals 18 times root 2. So while I kept the radicals and non-radicals separate, they still end up next to each other in the end, and they are being multiplied. Like 18 is being multiplied by the square root of 2, because it's all multiplication. All right, so I hope that this helped. We're going to move on to a more challenging question right now. So for this one, there are variables in it, which can throw some people off, but do not worry, they work the same as the other numbers that we just saw in the last question. So I always start with the variables, and I always try to simplify them. The square root of 7r cubed, if you're thinking about it this way, the square root of r squared is always going to be r. Yes? Yes. Okay, I hope that people said yes. So I simplified the 7r cubed. I simplified that into the r cubed. I simplified that into r square root of r because there's still one r left over, but then the other two, because there's 3 of them, can be simplified into r. So then you have to make sure that you do the same thing for the next one. So 7r squared, I just simplified that into r square root of 7. Make sure you keep everything together. So then I said negative 3r times the square root of 7r times 6r square root of 7. I got all of that from this part right here where I just simplified everything as much as I could. So after you simplify everything and follow step 1, it's step 2. Calculate the product by multiplying radicals together and non-radicals together. Remember, keep them separate. So I always start with the non-radicals. You can start with the radicals if you want. I just personally, that is how I work. So negative 3r times 6r equals negative 18r squared. And then I move to the radicals. So 7 square root of 7r times the square root of 7 equals the square root of 49r. Now I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, okay, square root of 49, I remember that from my radical, like square root facts, and the square root of 49 is 7, so I can simplify a 7 out and just be left with the square root of r, which I'm moving into step 3, simplify. So now I'm left with negative 18r squared times 7 root r. So just multiply negative 18r squared by 7, which should give you negative 126r squared, square root of r, which is your final answer. So I hope that this helped you. If you need any more help, feel free to email me or reach out through Google Classroom. And this is how I solve problems requiring multiplying radical expressions. Thank you so much for watching.